Hey guys, and now it's time for something completely different. I don't usually do toy reviews or anything like that. Sort of focus more on modelling. But in this case I'm putting the two together, where I've done some modifications to one of my new Transformers, being Galvatron from the Titan's Return line. And as you can see, I've got him currently in cannon mode, because they did quite a nice representation update to his Generation 1 cannon mode, and I'll just go over some of the mods that I've done to this figure, and just point out some of the Titan's Return gimmicks and things like that. Okay, so starting at the start, the first thing I did was painted the treads. They were originally the same purple plastic as on here, all moulded in one piece, and I just got the paints out, gave it a paint. The treads are black, two different shades of grey, and that sort of more accurately reflects his cartoon model. And I made the mistake of trying to get the pins out of the elbows to actually slide this assembly out, and in hindsight I think it was probably a mistake, because I spent a lot of time trying to get that done. And I got them out eventually, but they were really tricky, and it just scuffed the plastic a little bit. So given the opportunity to do it again, I'd probably just leave them in and just paint them manually. Coming up here, you can see these blocks here, these pauldrons. They are new. I'll go over those more in robot mode, where you'll be able to see them a bit better. Now you can probably see he's got quite a bit of undercarriage here. This part here is part of a third mode, which is I guess a Cybertronian Jet Spaceship, something like that. Basically I just took the pin out where it was connected, and this whole piece can just come away. This part in the jet mode, which will never see the light of day, is a little cockpit, and that's where the Titan Master is going to come in. The Titan Master line is essentially a reboot of the Headmaster, Power Master, Target Master line. So pop that over there for a minute. And without that, he's got a much cleaner cannon mode. If you take the cannon off, it does tend to fall back a bit, so you need this as a bit of a counterweight, but that can come off if you so desired. So what I'll do is I will just throw him into robot mode. Right, moving on to the shoulder pieces. The shoulder pads that he came with I didn't really like too much. They were these long flat pieces that hindered the arm articulation when they lay down like this, and if you lift them up, it's just looked way too high and silly for my taste. So I wanted something that was going to reflect the G1 cartoon. So what I did to get these is I got some insulation foam, and I started cutting down a few shapes to see what would fit, and had to pull the figure apart to get pieces on and off. And once I got a shape that I liked, I had to make up a more solid prototype, which I just used with some styrene, some plastic styrene, just to get a more solid feel, to see how that was going to go. Unfortunately, styrene, it looks a little bit homemade, a little bit gappy, so I wanted something that was going to be a bit more solid. So what I decided to do was to make a more solid piece using milliput. Essentially what I did was I took some measurements from my styrene piece and then moulded some out of milliput, cut it down to size so it was nice and flat, and just filled in any gaps with some green stuff. And then I had a solid block, and what I was able to do with the solid block is I was able to make a cast of it, just using some modelling putty, reusable casting putty. And once I'd made that mould, I was able to duplicate the shoulder pylons in plastic. I had some smooth-on plastic resin, and they turned out quite nicely. And then obviously once those had come out and sanded and cleaned them up, I just needed to paint them, so they're fairly accurate to the cartoon. So I was quite happy with how those turned out. Now the major gimmick in the Titan's return line is the Titan Masters, which basically it's a return to Power Masters, Headmasters, Target Masters, that sort of thing. So Galvatron actually comes with Nucleon, who is a little headmaster, and if you look closely, you can actually see that it looks like Megatron, which is kind of cool, you know, given the history of the character. So what I did with this guy is, he wasn't given a lot of paint, so I'll just transform him, turn him into head mode. Now he didn't come with this purple, I had to paint that on. And you just slot it in. Some of these connections can be a bit tight actually. There we go. So you slot it in, and there he's got his head. Now you're like, that doesn't really look too much like Galvatron. He's missing his, you know, headpiece and stuff like that. That's because they built in this funky little gimmick to make the head look a little bigger. And if you pull open the chest, you'll see what happens. He's got this little flip-up mask, which gives him more of a Galvatron look with the head crest, and that just sits in front of the mask there, quite a ways in front. Unfortunately, it completely restricts any head movement. You can't get any head movement. You can get like 2 degrees on either side because the inside armature keeps banging into the chest walls. So it's kind of useless for that. What a lot of people have done is they have actually cut this piece off and glued it onto the face, so that it's there permanently, and then you can get the full head articulation. Unfortunately, what that means is that you've got this big crown sitting on the back of the Titan Master, and you can't sit it in any of the little cockpits or anything like that, which sort of renders that part useless, which, you know, is a little bit of a shame. So I didn't really want to cut that up too badly, so what I decided to do was I was going to make a mold and try something a little different. So let's fold that in there. So what I did, with a great deal of playing around and effort, I managed to get a mold of the crown piece, and then I was able to recreate it without the chin strap, so that you get something that could just fit over the top and allow for full articulation. Now, like I said, a lot of people just sort of glued that on, but I didn't want to permanently affix anything there. So what I did was I got some more milliput, and I extended these cheek crests, I suppose, like all the way around. I have a finished article here, and so what I've done is I've swept that back, and what that does is it fits around the head and will clip into these little divots on the shoulders. And so we can put this on, just slide it on, and so now that sits there, just the same as the mask on the inside. Got your full range of head movement, but you can also take that mask off, and there's actually room to store it inside the chest if you want. So if you still want to have the head movement and use the Titan Master in the cockpit and other features like that, you can still do that. So let's just get his cannon here. We'll pop that in there. So now you've got the range of motion to get the head following the arm, and you can now, with the wrist articulation, you can move that around and to get more of a classic Megatron style pose with the cannon ready to go. One final little touch is that with this cockpit, the way that this sat is it just plugs in there, and then you have this fin that kind of represents the hand grip that he would have in his gun mode back in G1. But to me, I don't want this back kibble, but I still would like to have the pylon. So this just, sorry, I'm just working around myself here. This part just clips on here, which I will now declip. What I did was I made a little adapter on which this can clip. Allows it to move up and down. And this will just slot into the hole in his back. So he's got this representation there on his back, and it can move down and out the way for when he's in cannon mode. And now we have a much more cartoon accurate Galvatron with a bit more expression and posability. I'd still like to get the colour match a little bit better, but it's a little hard to get everything perfect, and it looks a lot different on camera too. So there we go, that's some of the mods that I've done on this particular figure, and it's been pretty time consuming and made a couple of mistakes here and there, but all in all I'm pretty happy with how it's all turned out. And the good thing is that most of this stuff is reversible, so that if I want to add this cockpit section back in, that's no problem. He can still have his Cybertronian jet mode or ship mode or whatever, and the old pylons can go back and all that sort of thing, and the face hasn't been cut up permanently. The only permanent modification is the wrists there, but that's turned out pretty well, I think. Very expressive. So there we go, that's a long and rambling video on just some of the toy customization that I've been up to. It's good to be able to use some of the modelling skills, painting skills, to be able to customize your figures a wee bit, because they're, let's face it, they're mass market toys, and gimmicks are the big sell, and unfortunately sometimes that can sort of damage the aesthetic of the toy. But all in all, I'm happy with how this has turned out, and makes the figure 100% better in my mind. So there we go, thanks for watching, have a good one.